got to the slide that I needed to get to. All right. We were founded in the fall of 2018, and of course we had a pandemic that hit pretty quickly after that, so we maybe didn't get off to the flying start that we had hoped we had wanted to achieve. But we had a clear vision in that we wanted to focus on personal computing, personal technology of the 1970s through the 2000s. We have an unwritten rule that to be featured in our museum, it needs to be at least 20 years old. So if you do take time to go visit after a while, you'll be looking at some of those trash 80s, as we affectionately call the TRS 80s, and some of the other machines that we have up there. We have over 12 display cases of different types of artifacts. We have all different types of vintage television commercials, which are a lot of fun to watch. If you go back and see how we used to market technology to the masses, it's quite different than what we do today. And we have a compilation of those on a display that you can listen and watch and kind of make fun of a little bit. But it definitely is a study in society when you go and see how we used to promote technology to everybody. We also have a lot of working computers on display. We're not a static museum. We're a museum to where you can get in there and actually work with the machines. So if some of you are reminiscing about working on IBM PS2s or maybe Apple Macintoshes 2Cs. We even have Commodore 64 up there. We have vintage gaming consoles. We don't do emulation at the museum, so for those of you gamers in the audience, if you're local, stop on by and you can play some of our gaming consoles that we have set up. And for those of you who go way back in time, we even have an Altair 8800 DM machine, which is kind of like the touchstone of our collection. So you can schedule some time to work with that if you'd like to. And we've had some students from Kennesaw State that have come down and actually done some research and some work on that particular machine. Also, our students are involved with the research and management of the museum, so it's not just a faculty effort. So if you are a current student and you want to get involved, please hit me up after class, after the conference, and I'll see about getting some ways to get you involved. The museum also is very active in community programs, so for those of you who are in the community and want to know how you can get involved or how to maybe involve the museum in your organizations, we do field trips, we have resources, we can do training. We have done some data reconstruction from floppy disks. I mean, how many can actually read a floppy disk these days? You can't buy a computer that has floppy drives in it anymore, so if you find a disk that has data on it, might be important, you might need to recover it. We offer those types of services for you as well. So guest speakers, we can provide guest speakers. We also have had some fairly famous people. You can see here that Matthew Stepka, he was one of our featured university speakers a few weeks ago. He stopped by and wanted to get a photo with our vintage Macintosh computer system from 1984. So we were very pleased to host him there. So you might be thinking, okay, so you're a museum, you're kind of stuck in the past, and this is a cybersecurity conference, which we're looking forward to the future. So why are you even here? Well, first of all, it's a shameless plug, right? I've got a captive audience. The museum is just right up the hill in the library. I'd love for you all to go take a look at it. So that's one of the reasons. But another reason is that we can learn a lot from ancient cryptography and how we can apply that to modern day cybersecurity. Because basically all we're doing is just coding plain text to where people can't understand it and help to keep it secure, correct? So that's why we're here. Take a look at some of those lessons that we have learned, some of the devices. What is the history behind people having this need to keep secrets? So well, I've got, let's see. There we go. The first one that we have that I just, and this is a super quick rundown because I know you all want to go to break and I know we ran over time, but I just picked out a few of the devices that would be of interest, historical interest to you. We have the Greek skittily, which was a rod of a certain diameter, and you would wrap leather around it and then have letters encoded on it. So it was a very secure way in ancient times to scramble up text, because if you didn't know the exact diameter of the rod, the encryption wouldn't make any sense. You wouldn't be able to decrypt it. So that's one of the very earliest ways that we started going and making sure that we had secrets. And of course, most of this was born out of wartime. Unfortunately, but war does seem to be the mother of invention when it comes to technological growth. Up from that, here's one that most of you have probably mentioned. Actually, when the Cyber Knights were talking to me, first of all, the first thing they mentioned was like, oh, do you have a Caesar cipher? And the Caesar cipher was pretty much one of the earliest types of substitution text that we would have. So this is kind of akin to maybe when you were in school and you wrote notes and you did a substitution like a +3 cipher. So an A became a D, that sort of thing. So if the teacher caught your note or your text message, they wouldn't be able to understand it. This was a little bit more complicated than that, but it really wasn't that secure. But it is something that Caesar had used, and of course those before him and many after used to cipher text to protect messages, especially when you had such a large empire that you needed to go and communicate with in secret. After that came the Alberti disk. The Alberti disk basically was a polyalphabetic cipher, so it was a step up from the Caesar cipher, which just used a regular alphabet, so it was pretty easy to break. This one avoided those vulnerabilities because you could do different types of ciphers with 2 different alphabets on it. And that came around in the mid-1400s. Also, you may have heard of Mary Queen of Scots and the Babington plot. If you are a study of England, then when Mary was imprisoned, I'm not going to go into the whole history of her, but she had to get messages out because they were trying to do a plot to kill and overthrow and kill Queen Elizabeth at the time. She used many different ciphers. She even created her own cipher that they were able to get secret messages out of her imprisonment. Unfortunately, though, Elizabeth had a pretty good spy master, Sir Francis Walsingham. He broke the code, and that led to, unfortunately, Mary's ultimate demise, as in execution. Not good. So as you can see, keeping these secrets is very important. Okay, getting over across the pond, as they like to say, in the late 1700s, Thomas Jefferson. He was a Renaissance man of many talents, but a lot of people don't know that he invented an encryption device as well, because we had to communicate secretly during the Revolutionary War and all the other types of conflicts that were going on at the time. And he has a Jefferson wheel cipher. And the thing that's interesting about this one is that if you can look up there, it's on a rod and it has multiple discs. The previous ones were just kind of a flat disc that you could twist to make the cipher. This one had multiple discs on a rod, and then you had the added security of being able to change the positions of those discs. So if somebody did come across the cipher on the Jefferson cipher, or the original simple one that we tend to see as a toy being sold on Amazon, it wasn't that difficult to encode or decode. With this one, you had to know the position of the cylinders. You also had to then, of course, know what the encrypted message was and what the encryption key is. And there's one thing that we keep coming back to is the key. The key is key, not to make a pun, but even today, we have asymmetrical keys, we have public keys, we have private keys. This is the same concept. You have to keep the key secure. If you don't, then your encryption is not going to be secure. And that's why we start seeing more of these devices becoming more and more complicated. The Union Army disk, for instance, they used a combination of flag telegraphy with it. They would call this wigwag. So you would have one soldier up on a hillside, line of sight, that would be using a flag to encode what the actual key was going to be, so that the troops could then set the wheel to the correct key and be able to decode the message. Of course, if someone was watching the flags, they maybe could figure out what they were communicating, maybe they couldn't. So they would constantly be changing that. But again, the communication of the key is almost, well, actually is more important than the actual encrypted message itself, especially with these early devices. Now, the Union Army had their own device. They used the flag signals. The Confederate Army also had a device. Didn't rely nearly as much on the flag signaling as it was, but it was based on a Visionaire system. And basically, it just is plain text that is encoded with a different position of a polyalphabetic key. And you could use these very simply, or you could go and change the key every so number of positions, and that would make it even more secure. Now, I think most everybody has heard of the Enigma machine that was used in World War II. The Germans used this to encode battlefield messages to their troops. What is little known about this is that it was cracked as early as 1932 by Poland. We tend to think that the Allies cracked this. In my next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the bomb, which was a computer, the first time a computer was used to decode encryption. But it actually was broken because the Polish were able to figure out what the keys were to the actual Enigma, the early Enigma systems that they were using. And speaking of the bomb, there were some very famous people that were involved with it. Alan Turing is one of those. I'm sure most of us who study cryptography have heard of Alan Turing. Basically, with the Enigma, you had codes that were changing every 24 hours. At Bletchley Park in the UK, they would employ thousands and thousands of code breakers that would have to try to decode the German messages within 24 hours, because within 24 hours, the encryption changed. So it was a nearly impossible task. So Alan Turing and his team came up with an electrical mechanical computer that would greatly speed up the process. There's a great movie about this, since we were talking about movies a little bit earlier, The Imitation Game, which came out in 2014. If you're really interested in the history of that and you can't afford to take a trip over to Bletchley Park to do the tour, it's a good way to see what efforts were being put forth to break that Enigma encryption. Now, of course, while all this is going on, you've got it seeping into popular culture. Popular culture, of course, is going to reflect the times. We had basically a toy right here. It was Dick Tracy. Now, I know most of my students in here don't know who Dick Tracy is, but I see a few faces that probably can remember Dick Tracy comics. There was even a movie with Warren Beatty in it. This was a slide rule that was created by the Lawrence Company that basically was sold as a toy for the readers of the Dick Tracy comic books. So this has been something, doing encryption has been with us for a very long time, and it's something that we use in pop culture. And of course, now today we see a lot of these devices still in use, not for cryptography for our data, but in escape rooms. If you've ever done an escape room, you're probably going to find some sort of coded message in there, and you're going to see some of the modern equivalents of these devices that you can use to crack those messages. I just want to mention the Toonie cipher there. That was the forerunner for the actual Enigma. It was an electromechanical device, and it worked with a teleprinter, so you would actually print out then what the encryption was with it. So to conclude this ultra-brief cryptography lesson, basically studying these devices gives us a better understanding of the importance, the societal impact, and then also learning what we've done wrong in the past to hopefully correct what we're doing in the future. Now, as part of this, I have brought some of these devices that I had in the slideshow presentation. They're sitting outside, and during break, which I know you all are wanting to get to, I'll gladly let you play around with them to encode your own messages and try decoding them. Unfortunately, they're reproductions. I know I said we didn't do any type of emulation, but unfortunately, these devices are very expensive. An original Enigma is selling for $60,000, and that's not in good shape. If you want a fully restored Enigma machine, you better be ready to cough up $300,000 to $400,000, and I don't have that in my budget. But I do have a video out there that shows you how it worked, if you want to take a look at that, and I will gladly go and help you play around with some of the cryptography devices that are out there. So here's a QR code that goes to a page that has our social media on it. I strongly encourage you to snap that, join us, like us on Facebook and our other social medias that Dr. Spangler had mentioned. And if you need to contact us, you can contact us at the MOT@mga.edu. And if anybody wants a personal tour while they're here today, I will gladly take a group up and walk through the museum with you. So thank you very much for your time.